What's going on, people? We are back with season 4 of the Unsilent Church Podcast. And I'm excited because this season, we're doing a theme called Serving the City.
Hey.
At Roosevelt, one of our values is to be city servants. So this idea of serving the city is very important and near and dear to us. And today, to kick off season 4, we got a special guest in the building. We got Kell Duncan in the building.
What up? Thanks
Hey, can you dunk though?
Yes. It does not look or feel the way it used to. I can still get there.
Hey, Kell be dunking.
He said he said he got the burner too, the shot. You know what I mean?
There it is.
It used to be. It's a little rusty now. It's a rusty burner.
So yeah, what I'm excited about in this season is just how we'll be able to. We're going to be talking about serving the city, but one of the ideas I think you came up with, John, was to think of serving the city through the lens of the people in our city, particularly people in our neighborhood. And so
who are actually doing it.
Yeah, who are actually doing the thing. And what we as a church can do to learn from them. And I think some churches do really well with this. Some churches are just sort of just doing their thing on Sunday. And that's it. And I think we obviously have a vision to be broader than that. So many ways we want to sort of see what serving the city looks like through the local businesses and the developers and et cetera out there. And Kell's one of the first people we thought of. Kell, maybe just introduce yourself to everyone. Are you the mayor of Churchill? I don't know what's a good way. What's a good way to describe you?
I've moved myself into a new role where I'm not there quite as much as I used to be. I guess you would say owner. I used to say owner operator, but I have a director of operations now. So I got out of the way of being a mediocre manager and into being a decent owner.
Yeah, congrats. And the Churchill, why don't you describe the Churchill? It's located right across the street from our church building. Someone had asked me, so the Churchill, what is that? How would you describe it to people?
The above view.
Yeah.
It's a collection of small local businesses. The unique piece is obviously that we're housed in shipping containers. But the goal was to focus on small local business for Phoenix. So it's 2 bars, 4 restaurants, and 4 retail spaces.
Nice.
I own and operate the 2 bars within. But the other 8 businesses are owned individually by small business owners.
What led to you starting the Churchill, the idea for it, like what you were wanting to do? And I love even as you sort of talk about it, that's suggested obviously by the fact that you're focusing on small businesses, but even the way you set up the Churchill sort of says something about kind of what you want it to be like.
Absolutely. The design is intentional. Around an 8,000 square foot courtyard. It's shared space. It's open. I guess for me, when we started, I just left my corporate job. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just burnt out on. It was a commission-based job. I was doing well and not happy. Kind of classic. Yeah. Burnout story. I left, had a buddy of mine, Hartley Rohde, who was the co-founder of the Churchill with me, who had reached out to me. You guys remember Hartley?
Yeah.
So he had reached out to me. He came downtown. I was showing him around. I actually had a very small concept that I was going to do that was going to be a mixed-use office, sort of co-working office with a cafe retail spot downstairs. He had a much grander idea. I think he was originally looking between Tempe and Phoenix, which is why he wanted to talk to me because I was living in downtown. And then we kind of got together. He had a much more grand idea, and then we kind of got together and collaborated to make that what I think it ultimately became, which is the collection of small local business. But I credit him with having a large idea of how it was going to look and feel already.
What was the initial sort of concept that you said you were already working on something that would be a sort of like creative collaborative space? What was sort of the motivation behind even wanting to create something like that? Because you had a design, you were in the sales thing, but you had a design background. How did that get to like wanting to create a space before Hartley?
That was a big piece of it. I was a graphic designer. I had done a couple internships. I jumped into a job. I wasn't really using graphic design at Lennar. Like I was putting up pictures of like 2 different bathrooms and asking which one would you prefer, A or B, and trying to get you to comment on our Facebook. So I didn't feel like I was utilizing my tool. But I had the design background. I wanted to do it, and I always enjoyed being around creative people. Like when you're in art school and you're hanging out in the art school building, like you're around a lot of people doing it any number of mediums, right? And there's a lot of crossover. It's just, I
energizing.
just always enjoyed the energy of
Yeah.
that. So my thought was, I'll put my office upstairs of this. I had a little building that I had picked out. I was going to put my office upstairs. I had some buddies that were freelancers. I was going to put them in there, and I was just going to tap into. So like a videographer, a graphic designer, just different specialties and mediums where you could go and be like, okay, look, do we want to take on a project together?
Yeah.
Right? And like downstairs was just going to be sort of a cafe, coffee shop / retail. And I really wanted to do, this has been done so many times now. It probably wasn't even original then, but the merch around that.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're designing stuff for the cafe, right?
Yeah.
Like that was really the plan. And it just, I had left Lennar, it was Lennar Homes where I was working, to do that. And it just, the timing ended up where Hartley called me when I was starting to work on that. So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
What's the story behind the name Churchill? Like, I'm just curious in terms of like what made you, because, you know, we get all the time with parking, you know, people like, I'm here parking for the church, but they mean Churchill. They don't.
We're not here to talk about parking. I'm tired of talking about parking. The Churchill name. So when I joined the project, there was actually 2 partners. It was Hartley. We had a third partner, and when he left, it was Hartley and I, and the project had a different name. If you might remember this, if you saw one of our presentations, it was called Blocks Cultural Market. Was the original name. When I joined, that was the name they already had picked, and that was kind of when they were looking at Tempe. So when it just became Hartley and I, we sat down and we kind of went back to what is this going to be? We changed the concept a bit. It was going to have a stage, and it was going to be more of a venue. We got rid of the stage, opened up the courtyard, and went through a process with an actual creative studio,
Nice.
monomyth studio.
Like an actual like
Like
discovery,
sat down,
branding,
full
all
brand
of that.
guide.
Got
full,
you.
Full like, why are you guys doing what you're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah.
What's the point here?
Yeah.
And they came up with some suggestions, and that's how we worked through that process. It's actually the name of the neighborhood, which is John Evans and Clark Churchill, I think. And we wanted something that tied to the neighborhood that was because we did it in downtown for that reason. We did it in the neighborhood for that reason. So it made more sense to us.
Got you. Yeah.
For that name.
So this just tags onto something I've heard you say a couple of times. And it's always stood out to me that sort of your love, your desire to sort of be in a local neighborhood, to invest in a neighborhood. What you've said is sort of, you know, I could make more money other places potentially,
For sure.
right? To be downtown and all that goes on with it, and the different zoning regulations, all that kind of stuff, right? But your desire to be embedded in a local neighborhood is one of the reasons why I think you ended up being downtown. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that. Like, why is that so important to you?
When I moved back from Seattle, Tacoma, Seattle, you move away for that long, you come back, you don't really know anybody. So I lived in Tempe for a year because I had my buddy was at ASU Law. And after that year, I bought a condo in downtown Phoenix because I was like, I'm going to move downtown. It's centrally located. I want to live in a city, you know. And so that was the decision. And
What year was that?
end of 2012. So 2012, 13.
It's a very different downtown. Then.
It is a very different downtown. So I moved downtown. It was south of the train tracks off of Buchanan, 2nd Street in Buchanan. Down there, right now, south of the stadium right there.
That's
And
like
so
that's not quite warehouse district now, is it?
it is.
It is. It's warehouse.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, we were it was called the Stadium Lofts.
Gotcha.
It's smaller, 30 units. It's not huge, but moved down there. I just wanted to be in it, like downtown. And what I realized is that you could take a nap on Central and be fine. Like there was nobody down there. And I was like, okay, but once you're down there, you also start to realize, like, I would go out, like I would walk. I walked a lot more. I really enjoyed, like we talked a little bit before we started, the study abroad experience, and being able to walk everywhere was like a game changer for me. And so I really enjoyed that and wanted that again. So I got comfortable walking places. You start to go out at night. You start to see stuff. You start to find, like, there's a really nice subculture here that you can tap into. There's people doing really cool stuff. It's just harder to find.
Yeah.
It's not as
You got to really be on the ground.
You got to really be on the ground. You got to really be in there doing it. But
You gotta
when
be
start
outside.
doing it,
You got to be outside.
You got to be outside.
people are like,
Come on, Kell. Tell them you gotta be outside.
You
Tell the people.
You can catch me outside.
Kell's a real one.
Hey, I told you, there's something about this guy I always liked when I first met him.
Yo, Kell coming to all the cookouts, dog. Kell, come through, dog. You can pull up.
So I found that it was really fun for me to go and find those things. And like, you start to feel like, oh, there's something here, and then you can be a part of it. Like you start to, it's easier to meet people. It's easier to connect with people.
It's a community. It's
you
like
bump into the same people. It's an actual community. And then that's what made me want to start doing that stuff. So a lot of the times when I was coming down here, the thing that I was doing before the Churchill was even an idea years later, was I was just around. Like I would just go to stuff. Like, oh, there's a happy hour thing. I'll go to a happy hour. It's TechCrunch. I don't care. I'm not in startups. I work for Lennar. Whatever. I'll just go watch TechCrunch. What's going on downtown? And so I just kind of like you start bumping into people at the same stuff, and you're like, hey, I've seen you at other stuff. I guess I'll just talk to you. And then you like start meeting people. And so I really enjoyed that. Like I really enjoyed being able to start going to stuff, seeing people, having those conversations, seeing what other people were doing. Like that's the stuff that gets me excited. Like, oh, there's people really trying
stuff
to do
happening
stuff down here. Yeah.
Cause that's a good segue into hearing obviously the story and stuff, but from your perspective in terms of like, you know, serving the city, right? And obviously you've been down here for a while. When you think about the church, what ways do you think that the church should serve the city? Like if you had to paint a grand vision of what that looks like, what do you think?
I'll answer that. I'm going to jump right ahead of it with the prompt that you sent me, because it had me thinking about it. It started with when we came down here for me with you guys. Like as a new business coming into a neighborhood, there's going to be a bar component. You're a church. You can say no and make that hard for me. Or you could be like you guys were and welcome us into the neighborhood with like a letter of support and sit down and be like, what are you guys doing? And that's the conversation we had. And it was like, here's what we're doing. That's not the conversation.
I thought I was getting a check from you. I must have messed up on that. Oh, sorry.
What I thought was going to happen was.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. That's too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah, it's still coming. It's in the mail.
That clip's going to get cut.
It's just a different, it's a different experience than maybe that you might expect as a business owner to come in and meet with a church.
Yeah.
You might get pushback, or there might be like, oh, you're doing a bar? We're not interested. You guys are in an area that is known as an arts and entertainment district.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You're serving the community you're in. You don't try to make the community you're in fit to what you guys are doing, right? Like there's a piece of like, we know where we're at.
Yeah.
We know how we're doing what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Right.
That's what we do. And I think for me, that just to jump ahead of your question, that's what stood out to me when we came in here as a business owner on something I thought you guys did really well. Yeah. It made it easier for me to come in and want to do stuff here right away.
If I could say real quick, just about like a lot of people in the church drink. Okay. Just want you to know.
I know that.
Whiskey.
Kell's like, I'm aware.
So, just what
it's like, I do own and operate a bar. I'm pretty aware.
No, I know. But it's, with some churches with a bar opening up next door, they just might not be.
Totally. Yeah, no, I got you.
So that was nice. And then in terms of serving the city, I see the work you guys do. Vermon's the one that asked me to join the Roosevelt board. Like that's not something I had thought about before until he asked me, and I was like, oh, yeah, I could get more involved. And so
that's dope.
Yeah, I think what you guys already do, and a lot of the conversations we've had are around, I know you guys have initiatives for affordable housing. I think that's the biggest problem we have in this city, in this state right now. So
that's a big problem.
About things. Yeah. It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
I think that's our number one problem. I think we've lost a bit of the humanity in that approach. And I think that's the biggest thing is there's a disconnect between that's a human being.
Yeah.
And treating it like just a problem or a nuisance.
Yeah. So what I appreciate about that is that, we've been talking about community and things like that, but it sounds like your vision of community and including people, what community involves isn't just the people who can pay all the money to do the things, that are cool downtown. So it's people who are having trouble. And what does it look like for us to notice them, care about them? One of the things I appreciate about the Churchill is, and I've seen you do it, you care about homeless people who come through, right? And you provide them, you give them water, you do what you can. I mean, obviously, Churchill is not a shelter. You can't do everything, but like you don't see them as just like how quickly can I like get them out of sight. But they're people who are also part of our community. And what does it look like to do that? And so I think that seems to be something that you care about.
Absolutely. It's a fine line as a business owner because you get into the problem of if you're too accommodating, it can become a problem because that word spreads, right?
Yeah,
and then
that's true.
And then
That's true.
then you really start. So you want to be comfortable, but you also don't want to be too comfortable. So it's a hard thing to do. But then again, that's where the piece comes in. It's like, yeah, come in and get a glass of water, go to the bathroom, hang out for a little bit. It's hot. But then at a certain point, we do need you to kind of move on. And usually I really appreciate our floor staff.
Yeah.
Like you probably see them engage with, they're used to it. They're comfortable with it. They're not abrasive. They're not trying to like get in your face and get you out. They'll give you some time and then they'll go over and touch the table and just be like, hey, thanks for coming in. If you're not going to buy anything, kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's why too. I think that it becomes a broader thing in terms of like you as Churchill. It seems like you're trying to care for people, immediate physical need. Maybe there's some water, maybe a little something to eat, but the church obviously can't provide shelter, and so this becomes. I think this is where the church serving the city becomes an important idea. What does it look like for churches like ours? In addition to, and it's just not just our church, we can't do it by ourselves. Keep partnering with Churchill and other places to think more broadly about an issue that is a bigger issue now than it was when we started in 2005, and many cities around the country. What do we do to care for people, right, who are homeless, who don't have any place to be? That only happens by having those kind of conversations and thinking through community partnerships of various kinds, I think, that begin to sort of think of that issue at a larger level.
It's so, it's a hard problem. It's all of our problem. So like, it's all of us that have to solve it. So the community collaboration is what is going to get us forward. You can't just look and be like, the city's going to solve it. The city is clearly not going to solve it. And that's not to bash the city of Phoenix. It's a challenging problem. But if the public gets together with the private, if the private and the public get together with the church community and everyone's working together, nonprofit, for-profit, everyone's like, okay, this is a problem. To me, it's a reflection on you as a city and part of your society. You are as good as your worst, your lowest. You're as fast as your slowest, right? And so, like, the fact that we have 1,000 people sleeping in the zone, and we have a name for the zone, and rather than put those people into shelter, we would just displace them with nowhere to go. We have the resources. We have the funding. We needed to find $150 million for the Suns Arena. We found it with a tax rebate in a snap.
Talk heavy, Kell.
Hey,
Talk.
So like,
not playing.
We have the money. It's there. It's a priority. It's a humanity issue. How do we prioritize that? It's also not a money issue. Like it's proven. There's enough data out there that says it's cheaper to put someone off the street into a home, get them into resources, and keep them off.
Wow.
That's it. It's not that hard. It's a decision, and we have to make it. So I don't know. Wow. That's a little off topic, but
no, it's not. It's not actually
on topic, brother. That's good.
No, it's very on topic. And the thing I love about that is two things. One, I think when you talked about what it felt like when you were just walking everywhere. Like when I first moved here, I didn't own a car for like 9 months, so I had to just walk. I lived off 9th Street in Van Buren, so I would just walk everywhere in the summer. It was terrible, sweating through khakis. It was
115
awful.
degrees,
bro. It was really bad. But what it did, it taught me, like it put you on the ground so you could see what was happening in a way that you just can't when you're driving, right? Walking is slower, and so you just catch things that you just wouldn't catch while you're driving. But the second thing, so it makes you more present. Something's going on, you could just show up. Let me just walk over there, right? A 15-minute walk isn't that bad. But not only that, it's presence, and then the idea of like collaboration. And as you even talk about like the city, it's interesting the way when we talk about like something as big as the city, but it sounds like you're saying like there's one way of looking at the city that is them, the government office, council people, whatever, people who are making decisions about the budgets. There's another way to say we are the city, and to say what does it look like when the church, for-profit, nonprofit, public sector, private sector, developers, creatives, artists, social, whoever, integrate, collaborate, and then make a decision to say, no, we're going to take care of, we're going to solve meaningful problems, period, right? There needs to be a gathering space that is safe and accessible and creative, and it needs to be in a certain neighborhood. And this neighborhood might not have it. They might have it in Tempe. They might have it in Uptown. They might have it in another area, but it wasn't down 2012. It certainly went down in downtown. And to say, no, let's make a decision to solve this meaningful problem. And then in the midst of doing that, to say, oh, now that I'm meeting neighbors and we can have presence with one another, build relationships, we discover there are more problems. Now we can work together to try to solve those. I think that's such a great way. And I'm super interested to know even just how you think about, we talked about public housing, poverty, but the idea of serving the city, when you hear the term serving the city, like what are some of the ideas or sort of visions that you think about in regards to like, man, the win, you know what I mean? Like if this happened or if the city looked like this, I think that like I'd feel really, really good about that.
I love the walkable piece. Obviously, like just having the slowing down. Yeah. Like we're a car focused city. That's not going to change for a while.
Yeah.
For you guys and what you do, for anyone, like when you talk about connection, collaboration, part of that is you have to know somebody. So like you don't know what someone's problems are. My problems might not be Greenwood's problems. My problems might not be Carly's problems. So like if I don't talk to them, I'm yelling into the void. It might not be the same. For you guys to engage with the community, then you get to see here's what's causing people stress. Here's what's causing here's their problems. Now how do we are there some that are similar? I'm sure there are. Can we start working on those together?
Yeah.
The ones that are different, how do we prioritize those? So I think getting to know your neighbor, right? Like being ingrained in the community is more than just showing up to work, leaving, right?
Yeah.
It's going in, like, what are your neighbors doing? What are their events doing? Are we bringing up our neighbors to like, when you leave the Churchill, are you going somewhere else? When you walk out of church, where are you going on Sunday after you get out of here? Are you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, those are great questions.
Let's go around to the other businesses around here and support where we're going to church. Like I think that's the thing that can, by connecting with everyone in your neighborhood, whether it's someone who lives here, someone who works here, someone who owns a business here, stakeholder, whatever, knowing who that person is, why they're doing what they're doing, what are their problems, like that's how you're going to start to figure out, like, it's the connection, it's the synergy. You'll start to figure out like, oh, here's we have problems in general.
There's a Bible passage that actually says like, love your neighbor as yourself. So just wisdom from the Bible, you know.
Yeah, nice start.
No, we just recorded we call it the Preaching Collective, but we just recorded something that talked about the idea of paying attention. You know, so even just so showing up is one thing, and that's important. That's almost half the battle. You show up, but you just realize people are actually there. And then if I just connect with another person and I pay a little bit of attention, I might learn some things. And then not only do partnerships and relationships form, but you are going to hear problems and struggles and tensions, but even just the care and compassion to have for another person's struggle, tension, I'm trying to reach a goal, to want to help. Like even those things help to bring some of that synergy and that energy to a space. But I mean, now you talked about Vermont asking you to join the board. You know, that kind of presence has like a greater influence now. Like how do you see that sort of playing a part in regards to like
presence is the thing I focus on the most right now in my life. My daughter's 4. I look back on the last 10 years and there's times where I can look up and be like, do I even remember the last year? Like, was I even conscious of the decisions I was making, or was I just on autopilot and subconsciously I was being driven by these things?
Yeah.
And so you create some space around that. You take a step back and you start to find some awareness around it, because you can blink and it can happen fast.
Yeah.
That obviously applies to my personal life. It definitely applies to business. You get caught up in like revenue.
Yeah.
You get caught up, like you still have to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
You have to make money.
Yeah.
You can't just show up and just like have fun all day, right? Like that would be great. I'd be really good at it. I'd be so good at it. But there's a piece of it where we all have to be present. We all have to be here, but at the same time, we all have to make money. We all have to survive. Like, we're functioning in this society together. So how can we all succeed in business or whatever it is that we're doing? And can we do that in a way that while we're doing it benefits the community around us, like benefits the people that we're working with? When you come into the Churchill, do you leave feeling a different way? When you come into church and you leave here, I think for me, that awareness and that presence of being like, this is why we're doing it. Getting back to like, here's why we're doing this again. Because I get lost in that all the time. To be frank, like I have investors, I have stresses that come up, and then I have to remind myself like constantly, like, wait, why are we doing this again? I'm thinking here. I forgot about here for a second. This doesn't matter because that's where I'm going. Right. And you start to. That's the presence piece for me that is a daily struggle. But it's worth the struggle. Right. Yeah. It's always going to be a struggle.
That's so great.
So you have more questions. We're going to keep the conversation going. So here's what we're going to do.
Cut video.
Yeah. So for those watching online, the video is going to cut off. So it's going to end right now. And so John will, matter of fact, I'll say it like we always say, love God, love people. We are out. If you want to keep listening, the podcast will be on everywhere you get your podcast. So we're going to continue this conversation. Go find our podcast.